Welcome to the Breakup Recovery Podcasts by your host, Barbara Stevens. Discover the wisdom and remarkable insights of Barbara Stevens, breakup recovery mentor, author, and public speaker. Barbara offers programs and solutions for any breakup so you can turn your life around, create lasting changes for the better, and embrace life again.
Hello and welcome to Breakup Recovery Podcast. I'm Barbara Stevens and I'm a breakup recovery mentor. In this episode, I have with me Alanda Josey. So welcome, Alanda.
Thanks, Barbara.
So tell me about your breakup and your divorce.
My divorce was final in January of 2013. And I was separated for 2.5 years prior to my divorce being finalized. I would love to say it was an easy process, but that's just not being realistic. I think the initial shock was to my spouse at the time. For some reason, it wasn't expected that I was going to move out of our marital home. And I did that because I felt like there was just way too much tension and uneasiness, and I felt it was best for me to just remove myself from the situation. It was an undertaking because when you have a marital house, your hope is that you can, reach some sort of amicable settlement and you can sell the property or, take whatever legal steps you need to take to just get rid of some of the financial burden of things that you had while you were married. That just was not the case. I found myself going back and forth to court, racking up lots of fees for my attorney. And ultimately, it was painful. It was a painful and challenging process. And as I always say, if you can reach a settlement, that will probably save you lots of time and definitely will save you lots of money.
So do you think there's been any positives come out from your breakup?
For me personally, I think there are, in terms of me just kind of owning what I am able to do on my own. I think being married, I felt I was a little bit too dependent on expecting that other person to kind of come in and save the day. And I feel like once you prepare yourself to divorce, you have to take ownership of all of your decisions. You now have to take ownership of all of the decisions you make for yourself. If there are children involved, the decisions you make as far as your children. So I think if nothing else, it really made me be really more focused, I'll have to say, and more of a person who sets goals. That just wasn't my previous life. I just kind of, just for lack of a better word, I just winged it because I always felt like, I have a spouse, if something goes awry, that person will come in and pick up the pieces. Well, when you don't have that other person and it's only you, it makes you a lot more proactive in making not only decisions, but setting goals for yourself. And it really pushes you out there to take a leap of faith when previously I just never thought about doing anything on my own as far as living on my own. Renting a space for myself and my children. I just never thought that was even possible. But I think if nothing else, it gives you the motivation and the determination to just, like I said, to just be more proactive in making life decisions for yourself.
So what has been some of the hardest things that you've had to overcome or do since your breakup?
Oh, gosh, I would have to say displacing my children. Taking kids out of a home that they've grown to love, out of their neighborhood, more or less out of their comfort zone. I mean, I think it's very challenging for kids to understand adult situations and all the dynamics involved. I know for my teen, it was extremely hard for him because of the changing of schools. For him, he was in his one school for 3 years, very comfortable. He was starting to get his peer group and just trying to figure things out. He was starting to come into that age where, he's figuring out, what he likes, what he doesn't like. But if nothing else, I think it's important when kids when they have their peer group and, they have the kids that they play with in their neighborhood, they have the kids in their school who are also the same kids from their neighborhood. So I would have to say the most difficult part of it was displacing what kids find as their normal. Because once you displace them, it introduces a level of instability, because then they're always on edge. I feel like they had such a sense of anxiety, not knowing what was next. Are we going to have to move again? If we do move again, where are we going to live? And will I like the school I go to? Will I like the kids? So I think that was probably the biggest challenge looking back. And I see now academically how my teen is struggling a little bit. I think that instability of having to change to multiple schools was the culprit of why there's so much angst with his academics at this point. So if I had to pinpoint anything that was a huge challenge, I would have to say is having to move them into a different environment.
And looking back on that challenge, is there anything you would have done differently?
It's hard to say. I think at the time, economically, from a financial standpoint, I did what I had to do because I was unemployed. Unfortunately, I'm, preparing to divorce and I'm unemployed. I think if I were in a better situation financially, I definitely would have done things differently. I would have tried to maintain staying in the area where we were, just moving to a different home for all of us. But it was a huge, huge financial struggle during that time, and that just wasn't a possibility. Things were different financially. I definitely would have took different steps moving forward just to keep a sense of stability for the kids.
And I see you have a website called Coco Mummy. Tell me what that's all about.
Well, I started doing my blog when I was first laid off from my job in 2009. And I did it as, I call it my writing therapy. I did it more or less to just pretty much talk about my daily life as a mom with 2 kids and just some of the challenges of parenting. It just kind of evolved into me talking about my divorce, because as I was looking at the statistics of the percentage of divorced parents there are in this country, I felt like sharing my story, not just on parenting, but also some of the challenges of divorce, some of the highlights of being divorced, just some of the steps that I took in order to get my divorce. I thought that would resonate with a lot of moms, especially single moms. So I decided to not only just talk about parenting, talk about cooking, but I also wanted to incorporate a component of that's been a huge part of my life for the past 7 years, and to just talk about it. I think the biggest misconception is there's not so much misconception. I feel like in some ways, divorce is kind of like the elephant in the room that no one wants to talk about. And I just feel like if you can share your story and share some of your experiences, it will potentially, it may touch someone else, who may, they may be in the same situation, and they may look at your story and say, wow, I didn't even look at it like that. I think it gives people a different perspective sometimes. I had one mother reach out to me because she was in a situation where she wanted to just talk about some of the things I had gone through, how I overcame different things. And it was all because she read my blog. Here it is. I'm thinking, not really getting that much feedback or that many comments, but people really are looking, listening, and reading. So that was the big part of it for me. I think as my life started to change, I just felt like I needed to share more and more of my story, just to give a real perspective, not fluff, not for the purpose of, calling anyone's names out or anything like that, but just to give a real life perspective on what it was like and what it has been like for the past 7 years.
So is your divorce the only thing you talk about in your blog?
No, I'll talk about whether it's the kids and I taking trips if we're traveling. I'll talk about cooking, baking. I'll try to cover different things related to any DIY projects I'm involved in. Also fitness. I think that's been a big part of my lifestyle for the past 7 years, because it's given me just a better sense of self in terms of my mental and my physical well-being. So I definitely like to talk a lot about taking care of ourselves when it comes to not only just fitness, but also eating right. And as I'm getting older, I'm finding that you really have to stay on top of getting annual exams, as women starting to approach the age for menopause. What are some things that I'm talking about with my doctor? So I'm also sharing those types of stories as well, because again, I think a lot of this is not talked about. You may talk about it with certain friends, but I just don't think we're very honest in sharing how we feel about whether it's aging, about really taking time out to take care of ourselves, especially when we're moms, because we're so inundated with our kids' schedules, our work schedules. So I like to just talk about things that I feel like other moms can gain some perspective on and also relate to the experience.
So your blog's not only about yourself, but it's informative, it's educational.
I hope so. I hope it is. Yes, that's the intent. Like I said, I want to give my perspective and just more or less some food for thought, because there could be someone else out there thinking, oh, well, if I experience this during, that time of the month, like, should I go to my doctor? Should I not go? Should I not ask these questions? I wanted to give a real life, this is kind of what happened to me. And these are the things you should ask your doctor. Don't think that if you're in front of a healthcare professional, you can't be totally open and honest. I want it to be informative. I want it to be coming straight from the heart, no fluff. It's everything that I've experienced.
So if you were going to give just one piece of advice to someone who has just broken up, what would it be?
I would have to say, find you. And when I say find you, I feel like after being married, I feel you're kind of closed in because your world centers around not just yourself, but you have to incorporate your partner. You have to incorporate your children. But I feel like sometimes we get lost in the shuffle of all of that. So I would say take the time to discover you. And when I say that, I mean, go back to that time before you were married and figure out what you liked, what you loved, what you totally were passionate about, and hone in on those things before making any rash decisions about starting a new relationship or just going out and doing something that is totally outside of the box for you, but also discovering who you were before marriage, and then honing in on all of those things, the likes, the loves, the passionate, all three of those components. When I think in my head, that's something that I feel like it gets lost in going from marriage to divorce. We kind of get lost in the middle. So I would say definitely take the time out to discover who you are.
That's great advice, Alanda. Sometimes it's hard when you've got children, you have a job, and you have all those active things in your life. So how would you suggest someone actually does that, the practical steps that they need to take to find themselves again?
I would say definitely look in your respective areas and find support groups. I think it's always good to connect with others who have the same experiences. Another, I think, key for me is your personal support network. What I found, and this is something that definitely worked for me, is connect with friends who are supportive and not judgmental. And when you need that time to yourself and you need to say, drop your kids off with friends because you've scheduled a yoga class or a cooking class or something, always have that network of friends that you can rely on to do those things for you and to allow you to have that me time. Also, having a babysitter, I think is extremely important, especially when you just want to take the time out to just care for you. That's one other component of what I found is helpful. And definitely making time to connect with friends. And again, I think if nothing else in this experience, you learn to weed out a certain segment or of your friends, because not everyone is going to be very supportive of your situation. I found that most of my friends who I would really kind of lean on as my support network, we've gone through the same dynamic. We're divorced, and we are the ones who give one another praise, always are there to give support, never judge or very judgmental, but we're always there to lean on one another. If we're having a bad day, if we're having challenges with our kids, those are the go-to people for me. So I think it's important to draw off of that energy and just surround yourself with more positivity than negativity, because sometimes I feel like you have to break ties with certain people when you're going through a situation like this, because unless someone's walked in the same shoes, they will never, ever understand what it is you're doing or why you're doing it. Why did you make the decision that you made? So it's extremely important to surround yourself, I think, with a very strong support network that is extremely positive and empowering for you. And then, again, connecting with other adults, I think, is a great way to transition from one lifestyle into a divorced person. And again, finding ways to take time for yourself, whether that's having dedicated friends who can take care of your kids if you're doing this, or, having a dedicated babysitter. I think that's very important as well.
If people are wanting to read your blog, where can they find it?
My blog is cocomummy.com, and that is the direct website. And I'm also on Twitter. My handle on Twitter is also @Coco Mummy.
Alanda, thank you for coming on to Breakup Recovery Podcast and giving us your practical techniques, your practical ideas, and telling us about what you do and your blog. It sounds fantastic. It sounds like you're very down to earth, and it's a helpful place for people to go when they're still struggling with their breakup. So thank you again for sharing everything that you've shared today.
Oh, no problem, Barbara. Thank you for having me.
If you feel that you are still struggling with your breakup, if you are experiencing intense feelings of anger, resentment and bitterness, and it is taking over your life, I'm here to help you in this area of moving on and coping after your breakup. I work with my clients one-on-one through my mentoring program. If you want to learn more about how we can work together, contact me via email or my Facebook page, Barbara Stevens Breakup Recovery Mentor, and book in for my free 30-minute sounding board session, and we can set up a time that suits. In this free session, you will walk away with clarity about your situation, strategies and tools to start building the future you deserve, so together we can start your journey of recovery. All my information is on my website, www.barbarastevens.com.au. If you don't want to miss an episode of Breakup Recovery Podcast, subscribe on iTunes, and I would appreciate it if you could take the time to write a review and rate the podcast. Also, feel free to message me with any questions that you have about Breakup Recovery podcasts or subjects that you want me to cover in future podcast episodes by clicking on the contact button of my website or my Facebook page. I'm always looking for ways to help you recover from your breakup. And the last thing I'd like to say is, be gentle on yourself. You deserve happiness.
If you would like to hear previous Breakup Recovery podcasts, visit barbarastevens.com.au. Connect with Barbara Stevens on social media with Barbara Stevens Breakup Recovery Mentor on Facebook and You'll Be Okay on Twitter. Read further blogs, view webinar replays, and download your free ebook, 3 Easy Steps to Surviving Your Breakup, and much more at barbarastevens.com.au.